Initiating virtual tour.
And we are live!
Actually, this is pre-recorded.
Hello there! You made it! Welcome to the virtual tour of the University of the Philippines, Cebu. I'm Annie, and I am a proud alumna of UP Cebu. And between just you and me, I had the best 4 years here in UP Cebu. I came from the College of Communication, Arts, and Design, where we did not learn only the basics in journalism and other communication components, but they also taught us how to become relevant.
You only have one viewer.
My college is also home to the fabrication laboratory, where people meet and converge to use different equipment where they can fabricate things, stuff for the advancement of industrial and product design. All of this comes from the creativity of the Fine Arts program itself. Hey, Sean, why don't you tell them more about the Fine Arts program?
The Fine Arts program itself, founded in 1975, is the pioneer formal school in the fine arts outside the national capital. The college is also the host to nearly half a century-old annual painting competition, Jose Hoya Awards, in honor of the famous national artist Jose Hoya, and from whom UP Cebu's Jose Hoya Gallery was named after.
As the campus of the premier university here in the Visayas, we have to be good. No, we have to be better, or even we have to be the best, not only in the humanities, but even in the sciences as well. Isn't that right, Sean?
That's right, Annie. In 2014, UP Cebu CENVI, or the Central Visayas Center for Environmental Informatics, came up with high-resolution maps using LiDAR technology. The use of this technology by UP Cebu CENVI provided government agencies with accurate data for more precise community flood risk assessment and management. This helped local government units make informed decisions based on data science and, in the process, maximizing their financial resource utilization. And in the case of the Naga Cebu landslide of 2018, UP Cebu CENVI's use of LiDAR technology allowed for one of the fastest search and retrieval operations in a disaster in the Visayas.
Helping the community through the sciences is very fulfilling. But we were not just exposed to that. We were also exposed to the social sciences, from political science to psychology, and all of these concepts helped shape our mindsets to become better citizens. In fact,
the College of Social Sciences articulates and addresses global challenges. The college offers comprehensive and appealing programs for high school, undergraduate, and graduate students. The Master of Education program is a non-thesis graduate program designed for graduates of the Bachelor of Elementary Education or Bachelor of Secondary Education who want to pursue their professional preparation through future studies in areas relevant to teacher education.
And of course, there were also budding business leaders in campus. They were the ones who had the nose for business but had the big heart to be of service.
Under the School of Management, students are not only taught to be decision makers, but the forerunners in marketing and finance. It also hones those interested in further studies of this field through its Master's in Business Administration program.
Today, I am now a practicing broadcast journalist, an opinion columnist, an entrepreneur, a teacher, a better person, really. All of this because of my training and experience at UP Cebu.
Nurtured to create, inspired to innovate, destined to serve. We at the University of the Philippines Cebu are driven by academic and operational excellence.
And that's it. Thank you so much for joining this virtual tour. I'm so happy you took part. Oh, look, Sean, a lot of people are tuning in.
But the tour is over.
Well, we'll just do it again.
Ready when you are, Annie.
Reinitiate virtual tour.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's another learning day for us at the Teaching and Learning Resource Center here at UP Cebu. We are so happy to have you here with us in another learning session. Today, we'll be tackling about the human persona in the context of human philosophy, and we have a very good speaker for today. He will also be tackling a number of things when educating individuals about philosophy. Hi to everyone coming over from UP Visayas. Thank you so much for joining us, and also coming from UP Los Baños, UP Manila, as well as UP Diliman. We also have members coming from UP Mindanao. I'm so happy to have you here with us. And of course, from the different colleges and universities from all around the country. Some are coming from the National Teachers College. Some are coming from other universities as well. I do hope you can also invite and let other colleagues join in this free and online session of learning about philosophy. Hi, good afternoon. For those who knew us from the last episodes and from the last webinars and seminars from the TLRC, I'm so happy to have you all back with us. We have a lot of new sessions, learning sessions in the next few weeks, and please be always on the line when it comes to these sessions. Good afternoon also. Hi, coming from St. Pedro Poveda College. That's a new school to look after. Hi, and from Surigao del Norte State University. Hi there from Surigao and from Misamis University. Thank you so much for being here with us. Now, before we start, I would like to call on Miss Paula for our netiquettes. Miss Paula?
Webinar reminders. We will be recording the webinar for documentation, evaluation, and dissemination purposes. Note that, by attending, you are permitting us to use any form of participation for such purposes. Mute your microphone during the talk. We want to make sure that the speaker is audible to everyone. We may remove you from the Zoom if you do not comply with this request. Refrain from taking pictures or videos of other participants. You may be held accountable for data privacy violations if you post such photos and videos without consent. For questions and inquiries, you may utilize the Zoom Q&A feature. Questions will be addressed after the presentation. Don't forget to evaluate. The link to the evaluation form will be posted in the chat box at the end of the webinar. It will be accessible for 10 minutes only. Digital certificates will only be given to those who have successfully registered, participated, and answered the evaluation form.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss Paula. And we do hope that you try to, as much as possible, take note of our webinar reminders. Okay, so I would like to say hi also to all of the Cebuanos coming over. Some are coming from UC main campus, and I do know some are coming from the other campus of UC as well. Thank you so much for joining us and supporting our webinar. Also, some are coming from Romblon State University. Hi there, this is new for us, coming from Romblon, one of our staff's hometown. So nice to have you here with us. Some are coming from St. Louis University, Baguio City. Maayong adlaw sa dinha. Okay, thank you so much for being here with us, and we do hope that you will still continue to support UP Cebu TLRC by joining our webinars. This is a, how do you call this one? This is a sort of benefits for us. We benefit from you attending, and you also benefit from us learning. Okay, let's call on our coordinator, our TLRC coordinator, Professor Nan Bernardes, to introduce to us our speaker.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jara. So, good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today's event. Sir Dan Aya Nino B. Hadocana is an amazing instructor of University of the Philippines High School Cebu, specializing in social science, philosophy, and world religions. Sir Hadocana holds an AB in philosophy from San Carlos Seminary College, obtained in 2018, and also a Master of Education in Social Studies with distinction from the University of the Philippines Cebu, completed in 2023. As an active member of several esteemed organizations, including the Philosophical Association of the Philippines and the Philosophical Association of the Visayas, and also in Mindanao, Societas Etica Philosophica Incorporated, and Phi Gamma Mu, the Honor Society of Social Sciences. Sir Dan is deeply engaged in academic community. His research interests are evident in the significant papers he has presented, such as Pope Francis, Laudato Si, and Marxist Metabolic Rift, a critic of capitalism, Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and the Philippine education system, and also the political economy of social media, artificial intelligence as manufacturing consent. With a strong academic background and also a passion for teaching, Sir Dan continues to inspire and also contribute to the intellectual growth of his students and colleagues. Please help me welcome Sir Dan Ayan Nino B. Hadocana. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Sir Dan.
Thank you, Sir Nan. Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so good afternoon also to the participants. And I hope you'll enjoy this afternoon together, learning how to teach and learning philosophy, appreciating philosophy in our daily lives. Okay, so may I have a thumbs up if you're ready now for our discussion on philosophy of the human person. Okay. So allow me to share my screen. Okay. So philosophy of the human person, a historical approach. So this is the outline of my presentation. First, I will discuss why the historical approach of philosophy is used during my class in Intro to Philosophy of the Human Person in senior high school curriculum. And then I will also present my philosophy of education, why I employed such strategy, why I employed such approach. And then the third one, we'll try to criticize, to comment on the existing depth and curriculum on the introduction of the philosophy of the human person. And then I will share to you my strategy on achieving the different objectives as teaching philosophy to students or transforming students into philosophers. And then the most part of this presentation will be the students' outputs, wherein I'm going to show to you some ideas that the students, it's actually their final output, final project, but how they engage with the different philosophers, how they agree or disagree with them. So I'll be sharing to you their outputs, and then also I will be synthesizing my presentation with the challenges faced while employing such strategy. and how I try to manage these challenges. So, with the implementation of the K-12 curriculum in the Philippine education system, the introduction of the philosophy of the human person course became part of the new subjects introduced as a core subject to senior high school students. Well, I think this is a remnant of the dissolved general education or the minor subjects in philosophy and logic in higher education. Now, with the implementation of the K-12 curriculum, what's left now in the updated tertiary education curriculum is more or less identical to philosophy is the general education courses in ethics. However, thinkers have criticized this transition to the K-12 curriculum. For example, David San Juan Jr. criticized the K-12 curriculum as a neoliberal restructuring of the education system in the Philippines. He explained that this curriculum reduces critical and creative thinking skills by transforming students into automatons, ready-made slaves of the corporate world and capitalist machinery. Also, Gerardo Lanuza further explained that the administration, particularly during the Duterte regime, employed neo-fascist repression in the education. This further questions the task of education, particularly in the K-12 program, whether it liberates the students or further subjugates them as an ideological state apparatus designed to feed into the capitalist machinery in the Philippines. What then is the role of education, particularly that of the introduction of the philosophy of the human person against this phenomenon in the Philippine education system? The restructuring of the curriculum into a factory of potential automatons ready to serve the industry is one description of the kind of education system we have right now in the Philippines. Students become a lot more like machines operating in programs assigned to them rather than becoming humans, able to discern what's going on around them and to introspect what's inside them. We can attribute this to the minimizing of learning hours for subjects related to humanities and social sciences, which may train their critical thinking skills. We can also say that there's an institutional factor to this phenomenon, and that is the senior high school program, or even in the higher education program, engineering, mathematics, and other sciences are given more support compared to the humanities and social sciences. Hence the call to fund the HUMs. It is the objective of the neoliberal education system to mold students according to the standards of industrialized societies. But as humans, we are permitted to question the system. What then is the role of education in this social phenomenon? What is the role of philosophy? What is the task and responsibilities of public intellectuals? So to answer the questions I posed in the preceding paragraph, allow me to introduce the Freirean pedagogy as my philosophy of education, especially in the introduction of the philosophy of the human person. First, he criticized the banking model of education. That is, when teachers seem to simply deposit ideas to students and soon withdraw them through examination and quizzes. This, for Freire, is a rote learning. Instead of training students to think, we merely form them to think the way teachers think. Well, I think this is evident in the Philippine education system, wherein teachers need to comply with the lesson plan directed to them, with assessment tools that are plainly a banking system of the students' capacity to think or to memorize. Here we can see that both the teachers and students are victims of this rote learning. The conveyor belt of the education system has indeed successfully transformed students into mechanized individuals, sculptured into neoliberal dreams that serve capitalist machinery. And so to counter this kind of education system, Freire proposed a pedagogy that humanizes students and teachers. The things I mentioned, such as neoliberal structures of education, the transformation of students and teachers into automatons, the banking method as a consciousness conditioning instrument, and other forms of learning that contribute to the exploitation and oppression of individuals are, for Freire, dehumanizing. So here, we understand dehumanization as oppressive and inhumane. So to humanize the education system, Freire proposed that it should be a problem posing, that is, it should come from the student's consciousness, background, experience, context, and horizon. And from there, conscientization, where the students situate their consciousness, may it be for the poor, the marginalized, and the oppressed sectors. So that a humanized education system should not come from the system that oppressed the people, but from the grassroots of their personal experience and contexts. This, I think, is a way to humanize the education system, to liberate the students from a system that manipulates and conditions their way of thinking, so that while neoliberal education programs students into machines, this pedagogy turns students into humans. Similar to Plato's allegory of the cave, we should not remain to enjoy the mastery of the shadows on the wall. Still, instead, we must liberate ourselves from the chains that want us to stay imprisoned, and once liberated, assist those who are trapped inside from the bondage of ignorance and rote learning. So after a lengthy discussion of the philosophy behind my teaching strategy in the introduction of the philosophy of the human person, allow me to first set the tone for a humanized subject. Second, present a critical stance on the curriculum of the subject. And the third, present my strategy in this teaching subject. The introduction of the philosophy of the human person should not be a banking style of learning. We tend to let students memorize details about a particular philosopher without a deep understanding of the subject matter. But I'm not saying that we should disregard these details. In fact, they are significant in understanding the whys of their philosophies. For example, the philosopher's social background, prevailing themes within their period, power structures, and other details. Our task now is to ask our students to read between the lines, to think outside the box, and to connect details and facts for deeper understanding. In the syllabus provided by the Department of Education, the topic outlined is arranged according to the questions related to being and becoming a human person, such as the human mind and body, nature and the environment, freedom and action, intersubjectivity and otherness, the human person and the society, an appreciation of life and the reality of death, as arranged here in the slide. We can see also the course objectives provided by the Department of Education reflect on the students' daily experience from a holistic point of view, acquire critical analytical skills, and apply these skills to the affairs of daily lives, and become truthful, environment-friendly, and service-oriented, actively committed to the development of a more humane society, and articulate their own philosophy of life. These topics are discussed in textbooks thematically, arranged according to the topic. They simply answer the questions using the ideas of the philosophers. In this case, we tend to feed the students with answers related to the philosophical questions on becoming humans, as if it is the only answer to that question. Here, I will contend that philosophy is a subject of questions rather than answers. And so I would propose a rearrangement of the syllabus. Instead of a thematic arrangement, we can have a historical approach. I believe that the questions as the human person started in time remembrance are the same question that we re-echo during our philosophical reflections. What is it to become human? And through periods of time, we can say that we are beings, part of this infinite time, participating in finite thus contributing to the answers thinkers are debating for a long time. The historical approach to the philosophy of the human person introduces philosophers with their thoughts on various questions. The task now of the students is whether to agree or disagree on these thoughts, thus constructing a philosophy of their own in reference to that agreement or disagreement of various ideas. This is what it means to be human, to appreciate or criticize ideas, and to form new ones rather than passively accepting the thoughts of others. This would create a space for discourse among students with some engagement with their selected readings and philosophers. So instead of dividing the class into different themes, at the start of the class, first we must introduce the questions that need to be answered with their corresponding branches of philosophy. So here are the questions related to the philosophy of the human person. We have on the human person, which is somehow related to the branch of philosophy, ontology and phenomenology. The second one is the human person and the self, the embodied spirit. We can have metaphysics and rational psychology. We can also have the human person and the environment, wherein it can be discussed in environmental ethics and cosmology. On action and freedom, we can have this on the branches ethics and existentialism, particularly on individual freedom. Ethics is more of a freedom regarding social actions. On intersubjectivity and otherness, it could be discussed in ontology, ethics, and existentialism, how we deal with other subjects, how we deal with other rational beings. On society and political, on society and politics, we have social and political philosophy, the question on knowledge, reality, and appreciation of beauty. We have epistemology, aesthetics, and on the meaning of life and death from a existential point of view. We can also add additional topics regarding the human person. For example, the philosophy of technology, since it is the human person that utilizes technology, whether it is used for his own interest or for the good of the society. We can also have feminist philosophy as part of being human, specifically of being a woman, and how these social relations affect the womanhood of that person in relation to society, and also on religion, the philosophy on religion. So we can have that additional topics related to being human. So following the presentation of essential questions on the philosophy of the human person, the teachers then would introduce a historical presentation of philosophical themes and philosophers in chronological arrangement. This will also supplement students' understanding of the different themes in the history of philosophy. For example, we have in the ancient world, the subject matter during this period is the world and the reality. For example, the question on the prime matter, the question on Urstoff, what makes up reality. So we have Thales proposing water. We have Anaximander, Anaximenes. We have Pythagoras introducing that everything is ordered, is designed according to number. Thus, the prime matter would be numbers. We also have the question on reality. We have the debate on the immortality of soul, the world of ideas, etc. And from ancient, we have the medieval period, which is also characterized by its monopoly of power by the church, the Dark Ages. So the main theme in this period, we can say, is that the question on God, the existence of God and morality, whether God exists or what is God, where is God. And in relation to the existence of God, we can also have the existence of evil, which somehow points to our morality, whether our actions are directed towards what is good or directed what is towards evil. But we cannot deny that even in the ancient period, there are thoughts on our actions, on ethical questions. However, with medieval philosophy, we can say that uh, the ideas here are somewhat related to the idea of God. And so the truth there, morality, what is beautiful, is rooted on our notion of God. We also have modern philosophy. The theme in modern period is it's a shift from the centralized power of the church in the medieval period towards the Enlightenment period. So we have here now the question on where can we attain certain knowledge? Is it through empirical senses, or is it through rationality? And so we have thinkers like Descartes, Leibniz, Spinoza, Berkeley. And then we also have questions on politics, especially that, again, it's a transition from medieval monopoly of the church towards the social contract, wherein the the power should not be concentrated in one class. The power should not be concentrated in one aspect, but rather we can have a social contract. And so thinkers like John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, Rousseau uh, proposed different social contract theories. And even what's it to become human? The question is that's one of the main topic in modern period. And further, in the contemporary period, we have now the problem on subjectivism and relativism, postmodernism, problem on existence, life, and even death. I think we already have a list of prominent philosophers and their contributions to philosophy. All we need to do is discuss these philosophers and ideas with students so that it will be their reference in answering the essential philosophical questions. By reference here, what I mean is whether they agree to that philosopher or they disagree to that philosopher. So at this juncture, allow me to present some of my students' output. It is arranged according to the philosophical questions answered in different historical periods like ancient, medieval, modern, and contemporary. So we can observe the development of answers from each period, and we can also read that students can ask more reflective questions, especially when rooted in their own experiences and background. So I'll be presenting to you the direct quotation from my students' answers, and then we'll try to give some comments on these answers. So for example, in the ancient period, on the question of the human person and the self, we have here the first one on the question of metaphysics. We can argue that this student, referring to that first quotation there, does not agree with Plato's notion that our perception are just but mere shadows of one reality that is found in the world of ideas where it exists permanently. Maybe in our classes, students will be familiarized with Plato's world of ideas, and thus they memorize that when we say Plato, it's tantamount to believing that everything that we see are just merely shadows, are just illusions of that thing from the world of ideas. The chairness of the chair, for example, I am seated on a chair, and that's just a shadow of the idea of the chair found in the world of ideas. However, we cannot give students an avenue for them to criticize or to contribute to this knowledge. What I appreciate here in the text of the student is that he criticized Plato's world of ideas in the sense that he proposed that everything is changing. Thus, he does not agree with the permanence of the world of ideas. Further, the conflict of change and permanence as opposing ideas by Parmenides and Heraclitus has been pointed out as a starting point of the question on reality. What is reality? Is it ever changing or is it permanent? The student in this case believes that reality is ever changing, thus disagreeing with Plato's permanence of things in the world of ideas. So in the second quotation, the question of the self is related to the question of biological sciences, wherein the student added genetics as one factor for the definition of oneself. Another problem that this student pointed out is nurture versus nature as studied by other behavioral sciences. So we can see that even if we discuss philosophy to students, they may have prior knowledge in answering these questions. Like if they're inclined to biological sciences, the answer towards the self is more inclined to answering it genetically, answering it biologically. And I think that those students who are inclined to believing or less subscribers of the idea of the soul would somehow share the ideas on the materiality of the human being. Another question is on human person and the environment. In the first quotation, it is the same student who conjured Heraclitus to answer the problem on reality, now answers the problem on human person's role in the environment. He stressed that since everything is ever changing, humans should find a way to make this change towards the betterment of the environment. It is clear that since reality is changing, it never stays the same. It either improves or not. Since reality and the environment is changing, the student suggests that humans should act, that change would be directed towards what is good and desirable, not only for humans, but for the whole cosmos. The second quotation there, it is the idea of the wisdom's Wu Wei, as suggested by the student, points to the human person's position in the environment. That is, we should be in harmony with nature. It destroys the anthropocentric perspective, which reduces the environment as a means of human consumption. We can also observe here from the second text of the student that there's a shift from the continental philosophy to the oriental philosophy, since he employed Taoism in trying to answer the role of the human person in the environment. And he further emphasized that Wu Wei, or we should go with the flow of nature. And since going flow doesn't mean controlling or possessing the nature, taking care of the environment means going harmoniously with the flow of nature. On human freedom and action, for the first quotation there, the first quotation poses the question of destiny and predeterminism versus rationality and free will. The student here attempted to criticize Zeno, the Stoic, for not being able to control human destiny. The student argued that it is through human rationality that we can be free, and thus not being subject to predetermination. I think what he meant here is that the que sera sera principle, what will be will be. To be stoic, that's what it means to be stoic, right? When we forgo of things and let things be, it destroys our rationality. It destroys our free will. Thus, this student tries to criticize notion of stoicism. Mind you, many students, especially in this generation, would claim to be stoic, would claim to be followers of stoicism, and stoicism absurdists, no? So they would claim to be that. However, it is dangerous for us, especially that we need to explain this to students, because they might be misinterpreting these stoic practices, these absurdist practices. Okay. For the second quotation, Further, this student suggests that our rationality guides our actions. We may be free, but our rationality will tell us what to do and what not to do, particularly regarding virtue ethics. So, while the first student tells us that it is through our rationality that we are given freedom, another student pointed out that it is also through our rationality, our reasoning, that we try to think what to do and what not to do in relation to virtues. What I'm trying to point out is it goes two ways. While rationality gives us free will, rationality also tries to stop us from doing what is not virtuous. Our rationality will tell us that it is through virtue that we can attain happiness, and it is through our reasoning that we can discern what is good and true as elements of Nicomachean happiness. The goal of action is intended towards what makes us happy, and so it is considered good. However, we can say that we can also question the relativity of what is good and true, so that what is good and true may be distorted according to our own personal interests. On intersubjectivity, another student employed virtue ethics to answer the question of the otherness and intersubjectivity. However, instead of Aristotelian virtues, he explained virtues from Oriental philosophers Confucius and Musi. He said that it is through these virtues that we can deal with other people, and it is through this behavior that we can relate to people possessing rationality and consciousness. So rationality, virtue is not only there to tell us what to do, but it also make us aware that there are people surrounding us similar to us, subjective, rational. On the second statement, the student here emphasized virtue in Epicurean terms, wherein humans should learn how to manage their desires. He also pointed out that despite pain and suffering in life, it is important to make them worthwhile by cultivating relationships with others. And this is how, for the students, we relate with each rational beings. Pain and suffering is constant, but for this, as what the student emphasized, it is how we relate with each other, and it is all that matters. On society and politics, to answer the question on politics and society, the student used Rumi's philosophy. Rumi. He explained that in reference to the philosopher that human persons should respect human dignity, social justice, and equal rights for all. This will result in prosperity and fair governance for everyone. The second student is suspicious with Plato's authoritarian tendency in his Republic. So it's not the same student who actually criticized Plato's World of Ideas. It's another student who criticized Plato's society and politics in his The Republic. The student is suspicious with Plato's authoritarian tendency. However, he considered it as a reliable framework for good governance, with reservations on freedom and rights. He also pointed out that the philosopher king could mean the emancipated populace, in reference to Dr. Imbong's column, Wanted Philosopher. For this statement, it would be such an ideal world to live in Moshi's Wonderland, as what this student described, a place where there is social harmony and universal love that relies on equality, peace, and prosperity. This can also serve as the government's commitment or responsibility to the people, I suppose. A society that bestows rights and services to the people, a society for, by, and of the people. On a side note, it was said that Mao Zedong considered Moshi, aside from Marx and Lenin, as an inspiration for his notion that everyone should be treated equally. So on the meaning of life and death, This student referred to Siddhartha Gautama's teaching on the meaning of life and death. She explained that the purpose of life is to let go of things that we thought were desirable, such as materialistic and pleasurable life, which could lead us to misery. These things are just temporary, and so what is permanent now is the emptied self, the Buddha within the self. The student also on death uses the Latin dictum memento mori, or remember death, or remember you will die, to supplement Socrates' unexamined life is not worth living. In order to understand the meaning of life and death, the student explained that in order for us to live a meaningful life, we must be mindful of death. And at the brink of death, what gives us satisfaction is an examination of life. Have we lived our lives well? So I think that's it for the ancient period. And uh, uh, we can observe how these students try to engage with their selected philosophers, whether they agree or disagree with their notions, and even supplemented their ideas through the personal reflections, personal explanations. And we can also observe that the philosophers from during this time are somewhat there's a gap between the contemporary thinkers and the ancient thinkers. However, we must be aware that these ancient philosophers are referred to even to the present, the contemporary thinkers that we have. Only that, again, there is a development from one period to another period. Medieval period on the human person and the self. So notice how the shift no from ancient to medieval. I mean, there's already that element of religiosity, element of the divine in explaining the questions. So, for example, the first statement, this it talks about the idea of soul comes now with philosophers tied to religious beliefs. On the question of the human person, the student now explained through the idea of Avicenna, Ibn Sena, that there exists a human soul that possesses rationality and free will. So rationality and free will here comes from, I mean, in the ancient period, we thought of free will as something, free will and intellect, as something provided by a rational soul, I mean, rationality. But in this period, in medieval period, we notice that there's an idea of soul in a religious element. Okay, we must be aware that the shift from the ancient period to the medieval period of history is delineated with the shifts of their themes. The former focuses on reality, substance and accidents, matter and form, Urstoff and primal matter, and others. The latter, on the other hand, is most related to God and religion. So for the second statement, although even Sena is Arabic, another student tries to explain man's rationality with the notion of an immortal spiritual soul even after death. However, this student disagrees with the notion that the soul has the capacity to discern and to be inclined to do good, since, as the student stated, temptation comes naturally as if it is inherent in human nature. This is, we can actually dispute this claim, especially there are students who claim that man is naturally or innately good. But what makes this student amazing is that he pointed out that despite our soul, the idea of soul being rational and having free will, there still exists an evil reality, an evil tendency inherent in human nature. So the idea now is, especially with ethics, it's no longer whether it's right or wrong, but we have now the idea of whether it is good according to the teachings of religion, or is it evil, which is contrary to our knowledge of God? On the human person as an embodied spirit, a student once again mentioned Averroes' notion of the soul to explain the human person as an embodied spirit. A human person as an embodied spirit, explained the student, do not rely on matter or body in order for a human person to exist. The student tries to deny the material existence of the body and the surroundings, except for the existence of the soul. I think this would this would somehow be a precursor to Descartes' cogito, if this student was born during medieval period. He tries to deny, to reject the idea of materiality. And the self there for this student is already present in the consciousness of the person, not anymore connected to the material or to the embodiment of that person. I think the same sci-fi movies that we see in televisions, like the transferring of consciousness into machines. You have Chappie, you also have Lucy, the transferring of this consciousness to a USB. Okay. Unlike Thomas Aquinas, however, the idea of infinity and immortality of the human soul is absurd to me, according to a student, for the concept of the second death has been explicitly stated in the scripture. So this student uses scriptures, which is his personal background, uses religion as his personal background to criticize the idea of the immortality of human soul presented by Thomas Aquinas. On the environment, the student agrees with Christian philosophers' view on the role of the human person in the environment. He explained that since humans possess a superior intellect, they are capable of taking care of the environment and maintaining respect for God's creation. He also coined the term stewardship, not exploiters and users of the environment. And from here, we can notice the notion of God, how the notion of God contributes to our role in taking care of the environment. We even have that famous motto, cleanliness is next to godliness, right? Second statement, another student connected the idea of primal matter and the supreme being called God as a designer and creator of all things, including humans. He rejected the anthropocentric view as an argument towards respect for God's creation, as human beings too are just parts of this creation. Concerning human freedom and action, the student, the first statement we can see there, the student based his understanding on freedom on Augustine's notion of rationality and free will, wherein the philosopher explained that humans are free, but their will should be in accordance with the right path. And this right path, where humans, especially Christians, should follow, is an alignment to the will of God. In the second statement on the question of freedom, this student tried to reconcile God's omniscience or all-knowing attribute as a predeterministic tendency, contrary to human free will. He explained through Boethius that while God perceives the past, the present, and the future all at once, human beings still have the choice due to his rationality. Only the consequences are predetermined. So I think this is also questionable. I mean, we can question the same topic. If God is all-knowing, does he know that in the future there's an evil event that's about to happen? Okay. A classmate of mine, when I was in college, had this thesis about prayer and God's will. Will God's omniscience, will God's all-knowing attribute, will God's predeterministic will change whenever we pray? Or if not, what's the point of prayer? Or if prayers do change the series of events, it would somehow deny God's all-knowingness, God's omniscience. The third statement there, this student compares God's will vis-a-vis human free will. He explained that even if there's God's will, it is still human free will that matters. His freedom under God's circle of blessing could mean that we are free only within what God permits us to do. But this further questions, are we not free to do what God do not permit outside his circle? Or if there are any boundaries, could we mean that human freedom is actually limited? Thus, human's absolute freedom is actually just illusion. On intersubjectivity and otherness, this student argues that human beings are selfish in nature, so that when relating to other beings with subjectivity or consciousness, human beings tend to think of themselves rather than the otherness of others. Relating with others could mean relating with a mean towards an end, towards the hidden interest in the side of the doer. I would, however, contradict this stance, since I believe that we can transcend beyond personal interests. That is, as rational beings capable of thinking, we consider others as an I or as a subject in themselves, not an object for a person or a subject's person's interests. On society and politics, the student's notion of the perfect world is similar to Augustine's Civitate Dei, wherein the society should be ruled by a benevolent ruler, which we can call God, promoting peace, order, equality, and liberty. The question, however, is, can this be attained where evil exists in societies? Or at least will lesser evil be followed in this society? Can this benevolent leader be Plato's philosopher king? And when related to the emancipation of the people, be achieved with a benevolent populace? Another question that we can point out here is that there are a lot of politicians who claim themselves to be God. I mean, not nominally, but the way they act, the way they decide, they play God, the role of God in governing societies. On knowledge and reality, this is about Erasmus' naivety. The student wanted to point out that naivety could invite oppression among the people and may be exploited by the ruling class. What the student wants to point out is that instead of accepting fate or being ignorant or naive, we should assert our stance and be aware of what's happening around us. On the meaning of life and death, contrary to the theme of the medieval period's notion of life and death, which is most probably connected to a supreme being, God, this student wanted to emphasize that the purpose of life is not to prepare for the afterlife, as taught to us by religious doctrines, such as in Christianity, we have life after death, or eternal life, or life in paradise. But it is to live the afterlife in the current life. That is, we should not wait for the life to come, but rather we must live our lives here on earth. I would agree, since the idea of the afterlife could be used as an ideological condition to escape the injustices and corruption here on earth. I remember one politician who said that if we cannot serve justice here on earth, might as well justice will be served in the afterlife. And that's what this student tries to point out. Why can't we serve justice, equality, peace here on earth? Why wait for the afterlife to come? For the second statement, the meaning of life for the student is based on the teachings of Rumi. which emphasized the need to embrace change and acceptance of our vulnerability. And the surrender of this reality may align us with our true selves. I think what she is pointing out is the losing of the self so that we can realign ourselves to ourselves. This is what it means to be transformed into a better entity. And for her, that's the meaning of life, to become better. And to become better means the losing of oneself, thus allowing one person to grow, to become better. So for modern period, the theme now shifts from God, morality, and religion as the primary subject matters of philosophy to the study of the human beings, since it is the transition from the Dark Ages towards the Renaissance period. It is also a transition to epistemic knowledge, no? Since it is a shift from the scriptures or the church as the authority of truth towards the Enlightenment period or the scientific revolution. It is also a shift towards political philosophy, since it is a transition from the monopoly of power of the church to social contract theories in different societies. So on the question on on the human person, the statement of the student, the first statement, is somewhat similar to Descartes' cogito ergo sum. However, contrary to Descartes' skepticism, he acknowledged the knowledge of things around him, or the res extensa, such as the animals, and he also tended towards Berkeleyan notion of esse est percipe, or to exist is to be perceived, wherein he stated that his existence depends on the perception of other subjects. So two students criticized Hobbes. So the first one, he said that man is a thinking machine, which makes us different from other living organisms. We are like computers programmed to perform certain instruction based on stimuli evident by our innate, universal characteristics found in the form of reflexes and instincts. And another statement from Hobbes, thus Hobbes implies that we have no free will. He also doesn't expound on the mind of a body. Although there are things in nature that are beyond our control, and I believe that humans are capable of making their own choices, humans are not systematic. Contrary to Hobbes, who states that humans are merely machines, these students explained that unlike mechanized instruments, humans are capable of thinking. It may seem that humans are programs, like computers, in the way they think. However, they express the difference that humans go beyond programmed thinking, but go further into rational thinking, which may include free will and intellect. So the last statement there, what this student meant with the calculus man is related to Locke's idea of tabula rasa, John Locke, tabula rasa, empty slate. Our human mind is similar to a blank sheet where our experiences are written on this sheet, so that what makes up a human being, the student suggested, is the summation of all his experiences. And I think that this student is inclined towards empiricism rather than idealism. The human person as an embodied spirit. The student, in the first statement, the student emphasized that to be human, unlike machines and other irrational beings, we are capable of introspection, to decide and to agree. Unlike programmed machines, which are expected to operate orderly, human mind is spontaneous and expected, and therefore are inclined to mistakes and conflicts within the self. So that's why they say that it's normal to be confused, it's normal to question, to be curious, because that's what makes us human. Otherwise, if we are as omniscient as programmed computers, then that denies us of our being human. Even our emotions make us human. Being human, according to the student, is similar to Nietzsche's notion on the Übermensch, wherein humans would create their path beyond the dictates of what is already common and used practices in society. This could be derived from the fact that the human's capacity to think They can go beyond social norms that are deemed to be manipulative and exploitative. On the human person and the environment, the student presented two conflicting views for the care of the environment. For Spinoza, we should take care of the environment since humans are not separate from the natural world as monads, and are therefore still subject to natural law. On the other hand, he criticized Machiavelli since he is inclined towards using the environment as a means towards an end. The second statement, the student introduced the notion of ecological self, which is significant in understanding deep ecology. It explains further that we must take care of the natural world as we see ourselves part of this world. On freedom and action, for the student who stated the first statement, humans are not free since they are bound by rules in the social contract theory. However, the student shifted the definition of freedom into the undertaking of the social contract, so that what she meant by freedom is not personal freedom, but freedom that entails social welfare. The student, another student in the second statement, explained freedom in Sartrean terms by invoking that humans should be free for them to define their existence. However, the student further explained that this freedom entails responsibility, the consequences of our actions, and the definition of our existence. This may suggest that beyond our freedom, there still exists a law that governs our decisions according to consequences and effects of this freedom that we possess. On intersubjectivity and otherness, in the first statement, although these ideas are based from thinkers in the modern period, we can still observe that this is somewhat related to the virtue ethics from the ancient period, which may be key guidelines in dealing with other subjects. The student in the second statement used the idea of Simone de Beauvoir on intersubjectivity, particularly on subjects of the opposite sex. He explained that since human judgment and prejudices are undeniable, it is enough to have a revolutionary concept on ideas that dominate mankind. Example, patriarchy, hegemony, and others. Another statement for intersubjectivity and otherness, another student quoted Walter Benjamin's philosophy of love as referred to the idea of lover's gambit and explaining how should humans interact with an individual with rationality and consciousness. Here we can see that love is required to relate with other people, regardless if this love is not reciprocated, hence the term gambit. Otherwise, when we expect something from people we love, are we not treating them as a means towards our own end, and that is to be loved in return? The student in this statement acknowledged that there is a conflict between the self and the others in such a way that our experience of being alone and with other people are not the same. However, it is also important to note that the self, as an individual belonging to a larger group of other selves, also acknowledges the presence of others within that sphere of interaction. On modern period of society and politics, in the first statement, the student clearly stated her opposition to Hobbes' social contract theory, explaining that the person in authority should not be brutish in the same way that the people in society are perceived to be brutish. She added that this means absolute power, an invitation towards corruption and greed. In the second statement, the student criticized Duterte's war on drugs as an example of Machiavellian the end justify the means. He explained that using this philosophy is not ideal for everyone, since the end goal, which is a perfect society, cannot be attained through violent means. He further proposed that for society to prosper, both the ends, which is the goal of the leaders, and the means, the steps towards attaining such goals, should be good. In the concurrent state of Philippine society, The core tenets of Russell's utopia are far from being achieved. The system is deeply ingrained, not only in Philippine society, but in the Filipino psyche as well. Capitalists continue to perpetuate the honest toil sentiments, and the Filipino people only seem to regress over time, refusing to consider Russell's alternative to this ideology. Modern period on knowledge. In the first statement, the student acknowledged that we cannot attain knowledge by sense experience alone and through reasoning alone. He further proposed that combination of both could be better in attaining knowledge, the dialectics of theory and practice. However, he further explained that even the combination of both have limitations, and so the world is so vast to be comprehended entirely by our mental capacities. We are familiar that during the modern period, there's the debate between empiricism and rationalism. Descartes representing rationalism. Then we have Locke, Hobbes, Berkeley for empiricism. So the student here tries to reconcile both ideas of empiricism and rationalism. For the second statement, the student acknowledged the limitedness of human knowledge in comprehending things, even related to science. He also explained that some things are unperceivable through the naked eye and require instruments for them to be seen, and other things may be in the future be measured and perceived through the mediation of scientific apparatuses. So maybe in the future we can have other source of knowledge more advanced than we have right now, and even more advanced than these people in the modern period could have. On the meaning of life and death, the first statement, the student's position is contrary to Sartre's freedom as isolation, but rather it is an agreement to Marcel's freedom as participation. His understanding of personal freedom transcends to the understanding of freedom within society. If for Sartre, hell is other people, what then is freedom and existence when we find fulfillment in other people through participation in society? I even have students who had side comments on Sartre. Sad boy lagi ni si Sartre, no? Referring to Sartre was a sad boy, toxic person. Anyway, another statement regarding meaning of life and death. Although most of us understand Camus as the absurdist philosopher, we can interpret him as finding meaning in life despite its absurdity. For example, in the meaninglessness of life, it is our capacity now to look for its meaning in its absurdity. And so, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. This is what it means to be living, according to this student. Relating it to the skywalk that is too steep, we can say that, will Sisyphus be happy if he is asked to roll that rock from the bottom to that steep skywalk that is trending now? Okay. For the contemporary period, there are questions that I chose to skip since it's somehow similar to other periods. On the question of the human person and the environment, the student provided a precautionary measure before applying. I'm sorry, someone's scribbling. Okay. The student provided a precautionary measure before applying Feyerabend's notion that the environment is for human consumption and scientific studies. He is aware that this could lead to catastrophic occurrences when the resources of the earth will be depleted. Another thinker, Peter Singer, the student subscribed to Singer's philosophy on caring for the environment, particularly the animals. He highlighted that the greatest good should be applied to the greatest number, including the welfare of animals, in which we can also apply it to the whole environment. So humans must take into consideration the good effects of human action, whether it is directed towards the good of the majority, including the environment, or it simply satisfy the desires of few people. We can also have the philosophy of, the writings of Pope Francis in his Laudato Si, which is updated now to Laudate Deum, on taking care of the environment, especially now that we are experiencing climate change, flood, heat, too much heat, and too much pouring of the rain. On action and freedom, this student considered freedom not only according to existential freedom, but also freedom as tied to economic capacities. She explained that freedom in the case of an unjust society could mean economic. That is, some human activities may be limited to only those who can afford them. Freedom in this case is selective only to those who are wealthy. Similar to the question of ethics, we can observe in our society that what is legal may be relative depending on their socioeconomic stature. On intersubjectivity, the student explained Fanon's thought that unjust social systems should be abolished since they eradicate mistreatment. She further suggests, still in line with Fanon's philosophy, that humans should appreciate the positive aspects of our unique experiences as rational beings. This is how we respect others in terms of their subjectivity. So I think this is there's still a lot of slides that I need to present, but more or less we can see the idea that it is that these statements that we see from the slides are from the ideas of students, referencing their ideas to philosophers, whether they agree or disagree. And in this way, we can see that there's an engagement between the student, the philosophers. There's an engagement between the present time, even the ancient period, thus continuing to pass on the question on being a human person. So, in conclusion, allow me to read my conclusion now. It is through this way that students engage themselves in the philosophical discourse with philosophers and other classmates. It is the students who answer the questions in reference to the different philosophers. So it is them who gives meaning to the philosophy of these prominent thinkers, as their appreciation is rooted from their personal experiences and background. And that's what it means to be human, to be able to appreciate according to our own horizons, in Gadamer's term, to disagree at some thoughts, and to discern deeply to understand the world around us and the self within us. The quest for knowledge is a never-ending journey. Our task as teachers of philosophy is not to provide answers, but to continue the question, the passing on of the torch. But that torch is not only used to enkindle, so that we may know and we may see, but rather a torch that will urge us to search even further, to seek for a way out, outside the cave of ignorance and oppression. May we, philosophy teachers, philosophers, lovers of wisdom, public intellectuals, in a word, lead the people to educare, towards attaining humanization, a liberation from oppression, and it is our urgent task. It is our vocation. Until now, there are still philosophical debates and discussions going on. For example, we have techno-feudalism as the new development of capitalism. I just learned this last week. Then we also have the appropriation or the misappropriation of Chantal Mouffe's radical democracy, or the application of Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent. We also have the decolonial turn of the Filipino philosophy and the philosophy and the emergence of artificial intelligence. As mentioned earlier, let us continue to pose problems, to ask questions, to search for answers, to disagree with ideas, to create space for discourse and disagreements. May we appreciate philosophy, and may we appreciate more teaching philosophy. And I guess that would be all for my presentation. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Sir Dan. Okay, so uh let us have a little break for Sir Dan, around 5 minutes, while we wait for a number of questions coming in at our Q&A box. So I'll give you a few minutes, Sir Dan, to rest for a bit. And also, I would like to say hi to all other participants coming from Manila, those coming from STI College Pasay EDSA. Hi over there from St. Paul University, Philippines, from those coming from the University of Perpetual Health System, Dalta Molino Bacoor campus. Hi over there. And of course, from the Baptist Theological College, as well as from Jose Rizal University and Misamis University. Thank you so much for being with us. It was actually not lengthy. It was full of inspiration coming from the words of our students. And I believe these students are coming from the senior high school students. Am I right, Sir Dan? Okay. So again, we are given a context, a new idea of how to teach philosophy. Or maybe this idea has been with you for a while. Have you been teaching philosophy the way Sir Dan has been teaching? But it is a good way to relate the historical perspective of how the human thinking has developed over time, and the kind of appreciation as well as priorities that humans have, questioning their environment, their society during those times. So I think this Freirean approach of pedagogy is actually very good to use as well, especially that if you wanted to ask your students to be more inquisitive, more intelligent in inquiring and in asking questions, as well as searching for answers in a more historical perspective, and this would be a great way. And Sir Dan has been using this method towards his students, and they have made a lot of progress in terms of being self-aware, being aware and empathizing with people and themselves, and also being aware of their humanness. And it's a very good method to try as well. I do hope you would appreciate this kind of method as well. As Sir Dan also tried to input to us that it is best that the students are able to introspect within themselves and be aware of their environment and their ability to think for themselves. And that's the reason why Hume's, or the subjects or those subjects that allows these students to be more human in thinking and more introspective, is very important in our educational system. Another is that using the Freirean pedagogy, criticizing the banking model of education, we teachers and students can be humanized when our thoughts come from our consciousness, and our consciousness is based about how our consciousness can empathize to the environment, people, and society that makes us human. And of course, learning philosophy can be achieved by asking questions about the human persona, such as the human person and the self as an embodied spirit, the human person and the environment where they live in and interact with, your freedom and action, our intersubjectivity and otherness, our society and the limitations of the contracts in our society, and of course politics, and our knowledge and reality, as well as the meaning of life and death. And it is important for students to ask questions, and for us to let them search for answer by asking more questions and dissect ideas, disagree or agree with ideas of others, and to create a space for conscious, safe discourses and disagreement within the school grounds, and that makes our students more human through the idea of learning or through learning philosophy. Sir Dan, are you ready? I think we already have questions on the board.
Hello, Jera.
That was a deep not lecture but talk, Sir Dan. Thank you so much for that. I also learned a lot. I enjoyed philosophy way back when I was in college, but I think I would enjoy being your student as well. Again,
You have the bardagulan,
bardagulan.
philosophical
Okay.
bardagulan.
I'm so amused with the idea of historical approaches because my philosophy teacher did not approach philosophy in this manner. Rather, he approached it in different questions that would involve me introspecting as a human. So the historical approach I think is really good, Sir Dan. And it would also help students appreciate what kind of things are happening during this time in history and why philosophers think that way. And I think it's a very good way to understand the different philosophical or to dissect the different philosophical questions using the historical approach. Okay. Shall we start with the questions? Do you have a question that you want to answer first, Sir Dan? Or would you want me to get the questions for you? Okay. So let's start with okay. This one, Sir Dan, I think this is quite interesting. The philosophical rumination is for the economically wealthy, or at least to those who can afford it. This is the viewpoint of this participant. The language it uses, for example, English, make the course even more alienating. How can we fight this mentality and make philosophy more appealing to teach or to do, or philosophizing more appealing to do, especially for our students? Okay.
Okay, thank you for that question. I attended a philosophical conference last week, and I was amazed as to there are some presenters who discussed their papers in Filipino. Kapwa-tao, ang pakikipagsuri sa sa mga ganyan. So, I think with the one I mentioned in the last part about the decolonial turn of the Filipino philosophy, because uh, it's actually a potential trend that we have right now in studying Filipino philosophy, and I think that's how uh, we can relate philosophy to the grassroots, speak the language of the people. Uh, for instance, when I discuss philosophy, I'm not really discussing it in English. So, or sometimes I'm fond of translating English terms, since philosophers also use their native language to coin terms such as Erfahrung, Erlebnis, no? Or Forswa and Swa. I have this attempt also, just for fun, to use Cebuano term for such terminology. For example, sinati is something to experience, right?
Yes.
And
To feel, to experience.
to feel or to experience, but there's a word. I'm not sure if this word exists. There's pakig sinati. I mean,
Pakiksinati is to experience with
yeah, experience with, so, or in solidarity with. So
insolent,
uh,
yes.
so that's why in one of my discussion on intersubjectivity, I use that term pakig sinati to another subject. No? So yeah, we're not only limited to using or to teaching philosophy in English language. And the one I said that there's a shift now, or a trend to use Filipino in philosophy and in writing papers. And there are also some, and I think I want to be part of it, writing philosophy in Cebuano dialect. No? So it's somewhat amazing also. I know interesting. It's somewhat interesting to to follow that kind of trend.
Right, exactly, sir. I also have this dilemma, almost the same as yours, because I am teaching science, so the different dialect and jargons being used that is very constant in science is almost the same as in philosophy. And I do understand that it's more enriching to teach something in the language that the students are actually more fond of or are using. And I think teaching I also have a teacher who would like me to express in the language that I am best at. And that teacher in philosophy also allowed me to write in Filipino or in Bisaya when I think it is best. So I think that that kind of approach can still be used by philosophy teachers that who are attending today. Okay. Next, sir. I'm focusing more on the pedagogy first because I think this seminar is downright towards the pedagogy of teaching philosophy. So I would like to ask this question. This one is coming from another colleague from the UP Visayas. The insights of your students are rich. How did you gather these essays, whether it's reflection papers, 1-minute papers, recorded discussions, or exams? In a semester, how often do you make them write their thoughts? And what other classroom methods do you use in trying to engage them to read and reflect and write? So this is very practical. So they are asking for a more practical approaches. How were you able to gather the thoughts of your students?
Okay, so since my outline for the subject is the historical approach, I would ask them to answer the questions relating to the philosophy of the human person as a term paper. So every after a historical period, they are going to submit an answer to that 8 questions using the ideas discussed in that period. For example, once I finish discussing ancient period, they are asked to submit a term paper answering the 8 questions in reference to the philosopher that they agree or disagree with. So yeah, it's a term paper, reflection paper, and in a semester, therefore, 4 term papers that they need to submit: one for ancient, medieval, modern, and contemporary. Although I did not yet implement this one, I'm planning for maybe for the next school years to come that I want them to read philosophical journals published in Filipino journals. Like that's one way of engaging with still with contemporary philosophers in philosophy. So I would ask them to read philosophical journal uh, as a course requirement, and they're going to submit a reaction or reflection about that philosophical journal.
Oh, okay, Sir Dan. Thank you for that. And in connection to that, another participant would like to ask if there are some alternative assessments or unique activities that you were able to administer for your students while teaching philosophy.
Pardon, Ms. Chera.
Are there, in relation to that question, are there some alternative assessments or unique activities that you were able to administer to achieve the learning competencies of the course or to your students?
We also have discussions. I mean, discussing of the different philosophers' ideas, because they cannot write their reflections if they too have uh, shallow. I mean, not they have not yet fully understand what that philosophers are saying. So another activity that we try during our class is uh, discussion of their ideas. Actually, the students were the ones to choose their philosophy. So they had a sharing of this philosopher, and then they discussed the idea of the philosophers to their classmates. So it's somewhat they choose a philosopher, they introduce that philosopher to their classmates, but not necessarily that their philosophy is rooted to that philosopher.
Mhm. It's like more of learning and being familiar with that philosopher and then trying to introduce that philosopher to their other classmates. But it does not necessarily that the student must empathize with the thoughts of that philosopher.
Yes,
Okay.
Amja.
Also, in connection to that, do you agree that philosophy should be taught by a differentiated instruction?
It's actually different here in UPI since you only have one section for both, I mean for the for different strands, right? But yeah, I would suggest that uh it's actually different. I mean, there should be differentiated instructions for since for students in STEM, UMS or accountant, ABM, since
Yeah.
as what I've mentioned, their understanding or their appreciation of philosophy is based from their background, right? So might as well we expect from STEM students that they would be more inclined to material to thoughts that agree with materiality. However, it just came to my mind now that if they would be mixed up together, isn't it interesting to listen to their different views? I mean, there would be Bardagulan in the classroom, in a STEM perspective, this from a UM's perspective that.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
but it actually depends on the teacher. Yeah.
Yes. It also depends on what the teacher would like to get as a result at the end of the semester. But then again, the universal thing is that for the students to appreciate and also use philosophy in their lives. Okay, let me like read some of the comments for you, sir. As philo ethics instructions, your study, sir, allows students for a progressive way of learning, wherein they would be able to appreciate the learning they can acquire. And like when we impose something, we cannot be sure what the students acquired in knowledge because it has something they picked up, not a requirement for the existing educational system. Thank you so much for this, Sir Dan. Sir Dan, your study is truly interesting. As a young educator currently teaching ethics, I am reminded of the idea of how I should not impose my way of understanding philosophy and its principles to my students, because the very essence of philosophy, as a love of wisdom and constant seeking of knowledge and enlightenment, should give opportunities for producing knowledge and not stagnating it. I am glad to have meaningful key takeaways from this session, and congratulations, Sir Dan. I think we still have one more chance to answer a question. Am I right, Ms. Paula? One more? Okay. One more question for you, Sir Dan. Okay. This one is an interesting one. How would you handle or have handled existential crisis of students that were awoken because of your philo discussions? How careful should teachers be in opening doors of thoughts without stunting student learning? This is quite interesting question because I've seen a lot of my classmates get so awoken that sometimes they forgot that their understanding of the philosophy might be the correct one. Sir Dan, were you able to handle such a
It's nice.
case?
Yeah, but um I think the more practical one is we ask our guidance. Kidding. Sir Jeff. Anyway, yeah, next
Calling Sir
week
Jeff.
for our KUAN series, it's about right, yeah, our guidance for next week. Anyway, I mean, why are we threatened
Mm.
uh of these progressive ideas? I mean, uh if they will be awoken because of this philo discussion, what threatens us of this awakeness? I mean, yeah.
My thinking
Uh
as well.
it, it's natural that they would discover new things. It's natural
Exactly.
that they would explore more to this. No? And in fact, the more confidential or the more things that we conceal from them, the more they get curious about that. No?
Curious about it.
Since they would explore more about that without our guidance. So why not share it? Of
Open
course,
it up.
I would give like disclaimer. I would give disclaimer at first that maybe there are some who who would understand Albert Camus as the philosopher that that promotes suicide because of the absurdity of life. Example, uh, that we need to have a disclaimer, that, for example, we discuss Camus, Albert Camus,
Mm.
on absurdity. And then we need to pair that one with philosophers such as Kierkegaard, for example, trying to push on the leap of faith, so that while Camus saying that life is absurd, life has no meaning, there's this Kierkegaard who would say that despite this meaninglessness in life, everything should not be explained, everything should not be comprehended, but rather it is in that faith that we appreciate life. We don't know the reason why we have this kind of life, but with that faith, we know that we still live, and that's the importance of life. I guess that's one way to be careful in teaching philosophy and opening doors or awakening thoughts like that. But
Okay.
but expect they would ask more questions, especially during lunch break or snacks time.
Yes. Another participant said that philosophy is the study of wisdom. So instead of landing with existential crisis, maybe this could be a venue to clarify psychocrisis. Otherwise, it would defeat the purpose of studying philosophy in the search of knowledge. My takeaway for this one, however, is that open up the knowledge for everyone. If it's philosophy, open up the knowledge that you know about philosophy. And as teachers, the more you have better content knowledge about philosophy, the more you can teach your students the clarity of what you are actually teaching, and the students are able to explore and decipher as well as be curious about philosophy on their own. So it's not more about leading to existential crisis, but the clarity of how you teach it, the more the students will be able to. Okay, so last question, sir, if that's okay. Do you think that
Okay.
philosophy as a subject should be taught starting from elementary? This, in the spirit of building critical thinking skills, might start them young.
Elementary. I think not elementary lang siguro. Well, yeah. I think in critical thinking we can
Yes,
we can train students critical thinking, but not necessarily introducing philosophical ideas that
philosophy right away.
philosophy right away that will
It's
scandalize
more
the
of
young minds.
we can also build them up through critical thinking and reasoning, and then
Yeah.
as they go forward, then they can learn from learn philosophy.
I think how, or the logic of philosophy, the tool of philosophy, which is logic or critical thinking, that we can train students to think
Yes.
that way in younger years. But these philosophies from philosophers with their ideas that may somehow uh, the young students, like elementary students, are not that mature enough to accept these ideas. I think I would suggest that better if it would be in the later years of the academic formation of students, training them to be critical. Yeah, I think that's better if in the elementary.
Okay, so that's Sir Dan's answer. There's one comment in the chat box. I think it is also effective to use situational examples when discussing the ethical theories of philosophers, because they merely discussing the theories would surely be a difficult learning experience to the students. In my case, I use simple and relatable situational examples that students also encounter or experience. Of course, we also need to be aware of understanding of and understand students' ways of learning and cognitive levels. More importantly, we can also add philosophical or ethical questions that will help provoke their thoughts about ethical problems. So I think this is in response also of how we should be teaching philosophy. But I think that was also being said by you, saying that Freirean pedagogy starts with where the students are coming from. So I think that also says as well. Okay.
Jera, can I have a commercial break or advertisement for a while?
Yes, why not? Let's talk about
Um,
it, sir. Go ahead.
UP Cebu will soon be opening a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy, maybe next school year. And one requirement for this adaptation, because it's an adoption from UPLB in philosophy, one requirement is that we need to send survey if students are interested to study BA philosophy in UP Cebu. So I think I'll just send it in the chat box, the link for the survey. So we would appreciate it if you would
You can share and answer the survey. So this
yeah.
is the link. Kindly kindly open the link and help Sir Dan get more information of whether we can open the BA philosophy AB philosophy over BA philosophy over here at UP Cebu. And it would be a great thing because for those in the Central Visayas as well as the other parts of Visayas can come over at UP Cebu and learn philosophy over here at UP Cebu. Okay, let's try to help Sir Dan. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
that, Sir Dan.
Thank you,
And also
everyone.
thank you for a very insightful afternoon of learning today. Okay. So let's have are we ready? We're done with the question and answer. And now we shall proceed with the awarding of certificate. Sir Nan?
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Miss Jara. And thank you, Sir Dan. Allow us to stop the YouTube live stream